Welcome to We the Waste People podcast, where two Southern metalheads discuss the news, break down class politics, and share what it's like to be working class leftists in the heart of Dixie.
Today, we continue our class discussion series with Nancy Isenberg's book, White Trash: The 400-Year Untold History of Class in America, an essential text for all working class whites, and especially for those caught up in MAGA and looking for an off ramp.
And lastly, we'll end today's show with our favorite and most important segment, Lifestyles of the Looting Class, where we spotlight one absurdly rich oligarch and remind you who's hoarding all the wealth.
I'm John Brown.
And I'm Butterfly Screams.
This is We the Waste People podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
So, John, it's been 2 weeks since we recorded our first show. I'm curious what your thoughts are, how you feel like it went.
I'll be honest, the finished production was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I'm excited. I loved it.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh, that makes me feel so good to hear because, of course, me and my hypercritical self, I'm just like, oh, it was so cringy. Or more like I was so cringy. I was obviously just like stumbling over my words, saying all the wrong things. But I don't know. I think
Same.
this is just one of those things that the more you do it, the more it just becomes second nature and it'll feel more comfortable, more natural the more we move along. But yeah, I mean, I also really enjoyed just having the conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was going to touch base on one thing from last week's podcast and our rapid fire question session. I said that I
Hmm.
voted for Mitch McConnell. That was wholeheartedly inaccurate. I've never once
I was
voted
wondering.
for
I was like,
Moscow
did he
Mitch.
really just say that?
Never once have I voted for Moscow Mitch. Moscow Mitch was in the
Okay.
state south of Indiana. I was not voting in Kentucky. I voted in Indiana. It was see, I almost did it again. Mitch McDaniels. And looking back,
Oh, okay.
probably only slightly better than McConnell. Um, he got out of politics and is doing other things. I still don't say I don't regret the vote, but it definitely was not Mitch McConnell. It was Mitch McDaniels.
Yeah, well, thanks for the clarification on that. So, has there been anything happen in your life last week, or not just last week, but over the last few weeks that have got you thinking about the Epstein class or anything you'd like to discuss?
Specifically in my life about the Epstein class, I can't say specifically about the Epstein class. I mean, Epstein in general, um, man, the fact that the wealthy are allowed to do what the hell ever they want and get away with it. And, they're able to make people believe whatever the hell they want.
For me, I have two things actually that got me thinking about the Epstein class this week. So, setting up this podcast made me acutely aware of just how much the tech oligarchs are gearing up for the surveillance state. And what I mean by that is like at every turn that I was like, opening a new account with a different platform, they wanted to know my phone number. They wanted to verify my identity. They wanted to take a picture, or I could provide my credit card. There was just all these like things that I was like, and John, from the start, I was like, I'd like to maintain my privacy as much as possible. I know this is a very public thing that we're doing, but I feel like I should still have the option to be anonymous if I would like. So, I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll just give them my phone number, and so I really did try and give them as little information as possible where I could, but yeah, I still gave up some pretty personal information just to be able to join some of these platforms. And the other thing that really pissed me off that I read in the news over the last couple weeks is that good old Zuck is building a data center in my home state of Louisiana. And I
Really?
know that we're going to talk a little, yeah, Yeah, we're going to talk more about that when we get to our lifestyles of the looting class, but I did want to just throw that out there. I guess kind of on the note of like the tech oligarchs and stuff, it got me thinking uh, or wondering if you have seen a movie called 2073.
I have not.
Oh my goodness. I honestly feel like it should be required viewing for every single person on the planet right now because if you've ever wondered what the outcome of years of our personal data being collected by these tech companies will be, you should watch this movie. So, a quick synopsis of it is that the main character, whose name is Ghost, Ghost lives off grid in a dystopian New San Francisco in the year 2073. The world is controlled by libertarians, dictators, and tech bros. There is no dissent, no freedom. Everyone is monitored, people disappear, and the net is closing in on Ghost. And it was so beautifully done because it was it was like it was part fiction but like part nonfiction. The way that the director like wove together basically like real archival news footage into the fictional parts of the story, like about Ghost and stuff. It was just really well done because it's hard to come away from the end of this movie and not think we are totally fucked. like, like, so, and for that reason, I don't encourage you to watch it if you are in a bad place mentally and emotionally. Because it's definitely not gonna, it's not an uplifter, that's for sure. However, I still think it's important to see the possibility of what's coming down the pike if we don't do something now to stop these tech bros, man. It's bad.
Well, I will have to see if I can find that and check that one out. Huh.
I watched it a couple of months ago and I was just like, whoa. I made my partner watch it. I made my son watch it. Let's see. I've been pushing it to anyone that will listen because it's that important. So yeah, it will definitely be worth your time to set aside some time and watch it. And that also got me thinking, as I was thinking on 2073, like, have you been seeing all the articles coming out about all these doomsday bunkers that the billionaires are building for themselves?
I've seen them here and there. I've again, just with how busy I am, I rarely get to actually pay attention to anything.
So Zuckerberg is building a big old compound in Hawaii. You got Peter Thiel building something in New Zealand. And then apparently, I read that, who was it? Bill Gates has like a bunch of tunnels or something coming off of his house. It's crazy. So anyway, I got to thinking about this. And so I went and looked up an article because I wanted to like dig around, see if I could find out some more information. And I found this good article from the Hollywood Reporter that like really goes into detail about the kind of things that these billionaires are buying for their bunkers. And I just feel like it's worth stating for listeners, like the absurdity of like how wealthy these people are, and just hearing about their doomsday prepping will just totally underscore that fact. Okay, so from the Hollywood Reporter article called Billionaires' Survivalist Bunkers Go Absolutely Bonkers with Fiery Moats and Water Cannons. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
Fiery moats and water cannons. This is not a joke. So, okay, let me just quickly read through a couple of things from the article. So, aiming to protect themselves from potential threats, including civil unrest, cyber attacks, nuclear bombing, power grid failure, and drastic climate change events, many work directly with general contractors to build kitted out end times bunkers, while others call on a handful of specialized companies. And so, there's this guy, Al Corby, who is the president and founder of a company in Virginia called SAFE, which stands for Strategically Armored and Fortified Environments. He says, quote, A lot of these guys are buying up King Air or older planes that don't have the electronic avionics and keeping one or two older cars built before 1986 in their collections so they'll still function in an EMP. The newness is it's shifting from the idea of a nuclear kaboom to protection against local threats.
Wonder
Due
why
to
they're preparing so hard.
I know, right? Due to global demand, bunker air filtration systems, which run from $3,000 to $10,000, are becoming scarce. He says that the company is currently working with two billionaire customers in the U.S., quote, both related to Facebook, end quote. And then one more, because this is where it really gets crazy. Okay, so Corby, who worked on a palatial 27-floor, $4.8 billion Mumbai residence of business mogul Mukesh Ambani of Reliance Industries, reveals to The Hollywood Reporter that his most spectacular project, due to be completed in 2025, is an island fortress created on a 200-acre property in the U.S. So we wound up literally building a 30-foot deep lake around the compound, skimmed with a lighter-than-water flammable liquid that can transform into a ring of fire. The only access to the island is a swing bridge. Okay. And then also at Corby's project, quote, there are water cannons that can take down parachuters, Apache helicopters, whatever's coming your way 500 feet in the air. No, I'm not kidding. There's still more. There's more. Quote, then we took all the dirt removed for the lake to literally build a mountain as natural fortification around the property. And we cut a tunnel through the flamethrowers, gassing systems, a steel wall that closes midway that could stop a 16-wheeler going 80 miles an hour and bollards at both ends. Wow.
So when it all comes to an end, they're what? Just the last ones to die?
Yeah, I guess. You know, as I'm reading this, it's so absurd. Like, I should have fact checked this. I should not. I'm gonna have to go and fact check this later because it is so crazy.
Here's the thing. There's even if it's not completely true, I'm sure there are some major elements of truth in there. Are you familiar with Love, Death, and Robots?
I think I've heard of it, but I've never watched it.
So it's each season is man, I don't know, probably 10 to 15 animated, I guess shorts would be the best way to describe them. I think most of them are maybe 7 to 12 minutes long, if that. And there's one that is, so there's 3 seasons now, if not 4. I know there's 3. But in each of the first 2, and I'm positive the 3rd season as well, there is one of the animated shorts is these robots that are left over after the fall of man, and they're basically going around talking about each scenario of what happened here. And a big part of their scenarios are these wealthy doomsdayers that are still dead. They're still gone. They only outlived the rest of the world by basically a small amount of days, because instead of building community to help survive, they separated themselves from everyone and still died.
Yeah. Wow.
That's crazy.
It just really speaks to like everything that we so want people to take from our podcast, which is this class system that like you've got the haves and the have-nots, right? And these haves are so insanely wealthy at this point that it's like they know that they've like accumulated an ungodly amount of wealth, and they're getting a little paranoid about it. You know what I mean? They're like, you know, those plebs, they're gonna come for us, you know, if we don't chill out. Like, so, but instead of doing the right thing, of course, they're just gonna build themselves a bunker. So
Protecting themselves from the problems they created.
Exactly. God, these people, man. Anyway, so yeah, that's what's been on my mind and bugging me, and I felt like I needed to share with you and whoever might be listening to this, because it's just ridiculous and something should be done about it. So before we jump into our class discussions session, unless John, do you have anything else you want to talk about or that maybe popped into your mind?
No, not at the moment. No, I'm still absorbing the what you just told me.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, it's like I said, it's so crazy and out there that I think I'm going to go back and like really make sure that that was in fact a true article. Um but my gut's telling me, yeah, it's true. It's true. Cuz one thing I do know is that the thing about Mark Zuckerberg and Thiel and Jeff Bezos, that's true, cuz I've been seeing that reported in many different outlets. So, but as far as like, water cannons and lakes of fire or whatever, like I don't know, I'll have to dig into that some more. But anyway, I am ready to move on to the class discussion. Are you, John?
yeah. Let's go.
Alrighty. So on to our class discussion. For this week's class discussion, we're continuing on with Nancy Isenberg's book, White Trash, The 400-Year Untold History of Class in America. So in the last episode, we covered the introduction in chapters 1 and 2, where she pointed out that in America's early colonial days, the lower classes of British society, the poor, the criminals, the landless peasants, and anyone else the aristocracy considered to be, quote, waste people, were brought to America intentionally to exploit their labor while also ridding the motherland of its white trash. The idea was to replicate a new British world that rested firmly on the same hierarchical class system of haves and have-nots back in England. The underclass served as economic tools for resource extraction for the British government, as well as a new social class that could provide a barrier between white aristocrats and black slaves. Okay, so today we're going to discuss chapters 3 through 5, where we look at the views of two of our founding fathers, Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, and the 19th century version of Donald Trump, which is President Andrew Jackson. But first, we'll begin with Ben Franklin. In chapter 3, which is titled Benjamin Franklin's American Breed, The Demographics of Mediocrity, the author explores the theories and ideas that Ben Franklin had about what it would take to make America a success. Spoiler alert, Ben Franklin had a breeding fetish. And so with that, we'll get started. Nancy Isenberg writes, as the colony's leading man of science, Franklin popularized the latest theories. Of primary interest here are his efforts to apply scientific knowledge to that most perplexing of all subjects, the creation of classes. It was an article of faith in 18th century British thought that civilized societies usually formed out of the fundamental human need for security to ensure survival. But the same societies were gradually corrupted by a preoccupation with luxuries. The rise and fall of the Roman Empire stood behind such theorizing. What Franklin did was to shift the focus to human biology. Underneath all human endeavors were gut-level animal instincts, and foremost for Franklin was the push and pull of pain and pleasure. Too much pleasure produced a decadent society. Too much pain led to tyranny and oppression. Somewhere in between was a happy medium, a society that channeled humanity's better animal instincts. Did North America offer the environment to achieve this happy medium? Franklin thought so. Its unique environment could strip away the unnatural conditions of the old world system. The vast continent would give Americans a demographic advantage in breeding quickly and more fruitfully than their English counterparts. Freed from congested cities, as well as the swelling numbers of unemployed and impoverished, Americans would escape the extremes of great wealth and grinding poverty. Instead of a frantic competition over resources, the majority would be perfectly content to occupy a middling stage, what he called, quote, a happy mediocrity.
The magic elixir to achieve his idealized British America was, in a word, breeding. In his imagination, a continental expanse populated by fertile settlers would create a more stable society. Children would replace indentured servants and slaves as laborers. Franklin's theory of breeding would remain a staple of American exceptionalism for centuries to come. He provided three irresistible arguments. First, he promised that class stability accompanied Western migration. Second, he reasoned that the dispersal of people would reduce class conflict, and encourage a wider distribution of wealth among the population. Third, what he called a mediocrity of fortunes was his belief in the growth of middle range class condition. His farming families were not poor or self sufficient, but engaged in some form of commercial farming, producing enough to support their families and purchase British goods. The most startling feature of his theory was that the class contentment he described would be achieved through natural means, or, to put it more bluntly, by letting nature take its course. The compression of classes persisted as long as new land was acquired in which people could spread and settle. Industry, frugality, and fertility were the natural growth of a happy mediocrity.
Yeah. Well, I think what stuck out to me for that passage was just the way that he refers to what we would consider like a middle class lifestyle as mediocrity. I don't know, it just has this like negative connotation to it, almost as if like, I don't know, you're not really living life if it's not opulent and luxurious. You know what I mean? Like it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
there's just this like tone there that's just, so subtle. Um but yeah, that was my main I guess you could say irk with that particular passage. How about you?
I would agree with that. Just touching on that authentic human connection. When you look at and it's not changed. When you look at like videos of say Peter Thiel, I
Hmm.
don't see him as someone who can truly connect with somebody.
No.
Musk definitely isn't on a true what's the word I'm looking for? Just empathetic connection.
Hmm.
Um, it's weird to think of Benjamin Franklin, especially when you think about all the things that we were taught about him, that is his true thoughts on people and on the middle class being mediocrity. It's really sad.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to add to that. Just made me think about as I was reading about Ben Franklin was he reminded me a lot of like the other academics that I used to work alongside. Just the air and attitude of like just the elitism that's always like sort of like right there, like underneath. It's the subtext of everything. Like all your interactions, your thoughts, it doesn't matter. There's just this. I don't know. I guess the best way to describe it is that when you're working in academia, there's like this culture of elitism, and I know that sounds very right wingy to say, but it is absolutely true. As someone who grew up in a very working class family, my parents didn't go to college, like I just always felt like I didn't belong. And I kept asking myself, why do I feel like I don't belong here? It's because the people around me were constantly giving off this vibe of like better than, they're just like superior to all these uneducated to the uneducated masses, like it's just it's a thing, it's real, it happens. I experienced it, and yeah. So Ben Franklin, I don't know, he kind of triggered me a little bit as far as that's concerned. It just kind of brought me right back to academia for a second with his like
Mhm.
elitist mentality.
It's so weird that that's human nature in some way, because not being in academia, just being in, like I said in the first episode, just graduated high school and went to work. It exists in some extent, I guess, in everything I've been a part of. In one way, shape, or form, people have had a way or felt a need, rather, I guess, to put themselves to be a better than in some aspect, someone else. Oh, I'm doing better than them because I'm in management. or, hey, I'm white, so I'm not struggling like they are, or whatever the negative connotation is of being non whatever white is.
Right.
So that
Yeah.
it's weird how that comes out.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Even in academia, like there's classism within academia. You know what I mean? Not only do they just on the whole have this elitist attitude like culturally, but within the institution, you see very quickly the hierarchy that exists. Like, you know, those who have PhDs and those who, like you said, are like in these like management level positions, and it's ever present. Like knowing your place is ever present in academia.
Yeah, that when I was in that just brings me back to my time in the corporate pawn world. Um, when I was up until the point where before I got promoted to multi-unit manager, my confidence level was good. I was damn good at what I did inside a shop. Um, and my struggle at that next level ultimately came from how I actually visioned other people seeing me because I didn't have a college degree. And probably 90% of the people at a multi-level unit or higher management position were college educated. And so I suddenly, even though the business itself didn't need a college education, and I thrived at actually knowing how to do what I did well from, just on the job training and ground experience and knowing how to treat people. Suddenly I didn't have the confidence anymore because I didn't have a college education.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom, I can recall her constantly complaining in her workplace because she actually managed to make it into professional level positions that required college degrees, even though she didn't have one. And she would often, that was something I would often hear from her. It's just the frustration she felt because oftentimes the people who made more money than her or were ranked higher than her, she would, I'll never forget the quote. It was like, these people can't find their asses with both hands, you know? So yeah, that was a common lament for my mother. So yeah, what you just said reminded me exactly of that very thing. So,
That's awesome. So
but
continuing on, despite what Benny thought about the wonders of breeding, the reality was poverty was increasingly common as the 18th century wore on. Philadelphia had its economic slumps, brutally cold winter weather, and shortage of wood that caused the poor nearly to freeze to death. In 1784, one man who was part of the working poor in the city wrote to the local newspaper that he had 6 children and thought he strove in all his power he could not support them. Hard work by itself was not the magic balm of economic self sufficiency, nor was Franklin correct that big families were always a boon. He was even wrong about his tabulations on American birth rates. Infant mortality in Philadelphia was surprisingly high and comparable to English rates, proving that Franklin's predictions of a healthy and happy population was more rhetorical than it was demographic fact. The quintessential self made man was not self made. The very idea is ludicrous given the inescapable network of Patreon client relationships that define the world of Philadelphia. To cushion his rise, Franklin relied on influential patrons who provided contacts and loans that enabled him to acquire the capital he needed to set up his print shop and invest in costly equipment. Chapter 4, Thomas Jefferson's Rubbish, a curious topography of class. Up next on the list of incredibly flawed founding fathers, we look at Thomas Jefferson. You guessed it, he too hated his own people, the author writes. Public education accompanied land reforms. In Bill number 79 for the general diffusion of knowledge, Jefferson laid out a proposal for different levels of preparation. Primary schools for all boys and girls, grammar schools for more capable males at the public expense. For the second tier, he called for 20 young geniuses to be drawn from the lower class of each country. Rewarding those with merit, he devised a means of social mobility in a state where education was purely a privilege of wealthy families. Writing in his plan and notes on the state of Virginia, his wide ranging natural history of his state, he chose a rather unsavory allusion to describe the reform. His handful of lucky scholars would be raked from the rubbish, leaving the majority to wallow in ignorance and poverty. Rubbish was his alternative variation on the ever present theme of waste people. He wasn't anticipating Tezza Roosevelt's Bunyan-esque allusion to muckraking journalists, but rather he was invoking the older Elizabethan meaning of raking the muck of a bad crop. The rubbish designation showed contempt for the poor, a sad reminder that very few people were capable of escaping the refuse heap. But the bill failed to pass. The Virginia gentry had no desire to pay for it. They had no interest in raising up a few stray kernels of genius from the wasteland of the rural poor. The education reform had little chance of passing, but its companion piece for funding workhouses did. As was the case, England's poor laws. The bill penalized those who waste their time in idle and dissolute courses, loitering and wandering or deserting their wives and children. Such people were deemed vagabonds. The solution for poor children was not education, but hiring them out as apprentices. Jefferson made minor changes to the existing law, which dated to 1755. The poor would no longer wear identifying badges. The vagrants would still be punished, and their children would pay the price for their idleness in a way that was reminiscent of the exploited orphans of dead servants in Jamestown. They may have been less visible class without badges, but they remained a powerful symbol of vice and sloth.
Yikes. I still see that same mentality in today's conservatism of these kids need to be working. They need to be working, and who cares about education? They need to be working. And you can see that that's the case because just recently Arkansas and I believe it was Florida, they just recently passed some laws that lowered the minimum age required for kids to work in certain industries or jobs, which is kind of crazy. And I know there are probably other red states out there that are doing it. And it's just, that passage is just so mind blowing to me. Just how everything always comes back around, wow.
But hey, protect the children.
Yeah, gotta look out for the kids, man. So I think it's important for listeners to know that there's this constant theme of eugenics going on throughout the book. And unfortunately, I had to cut a number of passages from this chapter for the sake of time. But it included a lot about Jefferson's views on breeding and how lower class people should be bred like livestock, the goal being to produce the best offspring possible. He was even obsessed with skin color and wondered how blacks might become more white with each passing generation, whether by breeding with whites or by them moving to a more northern environment. It's this type of eugenic thinking. It's just like an ongoing thing throughout the book. So I can't express enough how critical it is to read it, the whole book in its entirety, to understand just how cruel and disgusting the ruling Anglo-American class was back in the day, and still is in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's it. That's it for me. That's all I got for that one. Well, let's move on to chapter 5. Okay, so this one is called Andrew Jackson's Cracker Country, the Squatter as Common Man. And I have to say this was the toughest chapter for me to pare down because it covers the history and meaning of terms like squatter and cracker while also demonstrating how Andrew Jackson expressed a lot of those same defining qualities. There's just so many echoes of this very political moment included in this chapter. So we're going to be reading a little bit more from this one than the previous two. And so with that, she writes, the Western territories were for all intents and purposes America's colonies, Economic prosperity had actually declined for most Americans in the wake of the Revolution. Those untethered from the land, who formed the ever expanding population of landless squatters heading into the Trans Appalachian West, unleashed mixed feelings. To many minds, the migrant poor represented the United States' recreation of Britain's most despised and impoverished class, vagrants. During the Revolution, under the Articles of Confederation, Congress drew a sharp line between those entitled to the privileges of citizenship and the paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives from justice who stood outside the national community. The presumptive, quote, new man of the squatter's frontier embodied the best and the worst of the American character. The, quote, Adam of the American wilderness had a split personality. He was half hardy rustic and half dirt-carrying highwayman. In his most favorable cast as backwoodsman, he was a homespun philosopher, an independent spirit, and a strong and courageous man who shunned fame and wealth. But turn him over and he became the white savage, a ruthless brawler and eye gouger. This unwholesome type lived a brute existence in a dingy log cabin with yelping dogs at his heels, a haggard wife, and a mongrel brood of brown and yellow brats to complete the sorry scene. Early Republican America had become a cracker country. Both squatter and cracker were Americanisms, terms that updated inherited English notions of idleness and vagrancy. Squatter, in one 1815 dictionary, was a cant name among New Englanders for a person who illegally occupied land he did not own. The term suggested squashing, flattening out, or beating down. It conjured images of scattering, spinning outward, spilling people across the land.
Crackers, a first period in the records of British officials in the 1760s, and described a population with nearly identical traits. As backcountry banditti, villains, and horse thieves, they were dismissed as idle stragglers and a set of vagabonds often worse than the Indians. Their lineage, as it were, could be traced back to North Carolina and before that to Virginia's rejects and renegades. An Anglican minister, Charles Wood Mason, who traveled for 6 years in the Carolinas wilderness in the 1760s, offered the most damning report of the lazy, licentious, drunken, and whoring men and women whom he had judged the poorest excuse for British settlers he ever met. For the Virginia crackers he encountered were foolish enough to argue over a turd. The women were the women were sluttish by nature, known to pull their clothes tightly around their breasts and hips so as to emphasize their shape. By the 1830s and 40s, he was fully a symbol of partisan politics, celebrated as the iconic common man who came to epitomize Jacksonian democracy. Americans tend to forget that Andrew Jackson was the first Westerner elected president. Tall, lanky, with a raw-boned look of a true backwoodsman. He wore the harsh life of the frontier on his face and literally carried a bullet next to his heart. Ferocious in his resentments, driven to wreak revenge against his enemies, he often acted without deliberation and justified his behavior as a law unto himself. His controversial reputation made him the target of attacks that painted him as a Tennessee cracker. His wife Rachel's backcountry divorce and her recourse to both cigar and corncob pipe confirmed the couple as Nashville bumpkins, at least in the eyes of their eastern detractors. His supporters adored his rough edges, his land hunger, and his close identification with the Tennessee wilderness. As a representative of America's country cracker, Jackson unquestionably added a new class dimension to the meaning of democracy. But the message of Jackson's presidency was not about equality as much as a new style of aggressive expansion. In 1818, General Andrew Jackson invaded Florida without presidential approval. As president, he supported the forced removal of the Cherokee from the southeastern states and willfully ignored the opinion of the Supreme Court. Taking and clearing land, using violent means if necessary, and acting without legal authority. Jackson was arguably the political heir of the cracker and squatter. As an outsider to Washington, save for a brief, unproductive stint in Congress, his qualifications from the field of war where his record sparked heated criticism. He was a slave-holding planter whose reputation situated him not in the halls of power, but among the common stock. In the Tennessee backcountry, where settlement came much later than it did on the East Coast, land owning was the class station ostensibly had shallower roots.
Okay, so there's more to read. We're about to get into more specifics about Andrew Jackson himself, but before we do that, did you have any thoughts on what we've read so far, John?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot since I originally read slash listened to this chapter, and again, sitting here reading it. Um, I think about the comparisons of Trump to Jackson, both real and imagined comparisons by all of us, by his supporters, and by himself. If I'm not mistaken, right now, Andrew Jackson is the president that he has on the wall behind the Resolute desk. Um, and, even in his first term, a lot of people that I talked to, especially his supporters, compared him to Jackson. And when you really break down the two men, the only real similarities are just their tyrannical styles. Um, you know, Jackson was an average man. He was a man that came up, poorer than most. He was a bit of a savage type man, but he did make his way to the presidency. Uh, DJT was none of that. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He avoided getting, being drafted to the war. Did everything he could to not serve. There's so many things that they're not alike up until the point of presidency that it's hard for me to take people serious when they actually compare them and say they're so much alike.
That's interesting because I'll be honest. Until I read this chapter, like the most I really knew about Andrew Jackson, and I'm sure at some point I'd probably read more, but I just don't remember. But the main thing that sticks out about Andrew Jackson to me was that he was responsible for the removal of the Indians in the Southeast. He is responsible. Well, he also defied the Supreme Court over that whole thing because I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court was like, no, you can't do that. And he did it anyway.
Yep.
So, yeah, most of what I know about Andrew Jackson relates specifically to his treatment of Native Americans. The one other thing I heard or I remember about him is, I don't know, didn't he do something with like central banking or something? Like something to do with central banking. I don't remember the details.
Yes, yeah, he did. He was, again, I'm horrible at repeating the things I've listened to over the years. He absolutely went in, and if I'm not, I could be completely wrong in this, but I believe he went in and dismantled the central banking system that had been established. Man, I'm drawing a blank. But yeah, during Washington's administration, Washington's right hand man, there's an entire musical about the guy. I cannot
Hamilton.
Thank you. Yes. Hamilton had created the central bank, had started the creation of the central bank, and Jackson had went in and purposefully dismantled it. It actually caused a lot of turmoil in the country. It went into a recession, a pretty deep recession. I don't think it actually ever made it to depression at that time, but it did. It hit people pretty hard. So yeah, you are absolutely spot on about that with the banking.
Yeah, I think isn't that still like a fever dream of like libertarian types? Because I remember back in, okay, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but we're here to be vulnerable, right? So
Absolutely.
in like 2008 or so, I was kind of flirting with some like Ron Paul libertarianism, and I just remember like, learning about the Federal Reserve and how it's like fiat currency and all this other stuff, and like I just remember that being a huge deal for libertarians back then, and I think it still is. So as far as like Andrew Jackson goes, I guess for me, I I w- I think I have one slight disagreement in that he was different from Trump. He had to have had means if he was a slave owner prior to becoming president, or was he not a slave owner before
No.
president?
I believe he was a slave owner, but again, he didn't. And again, I'm horrible about things like this. He was closer to basically middle class than Trump has ever thought about being, or what we
Yeah,
would
so
consider middle class.
like a bootstraps kind of guy.
Yeah, yeah.
I got you. I got you. All right. So moving on. All right. Let's dive deeper into Mr. Jackson. Jackson did not look or act like a conventional politician, which was a fundamental part of his appeal. His fiery temper and lack of scholarly deportment permanently marked him. A sworn enemy put it best, quote, boisterous in ordinary conversation, he makes up in oaths what he lacks in arguments, end quote. Not known for his subtle reasoning, Jackson was blunt in his opinions and quick to resent any who disagreed with him. Shouting curses put him in the company of both common soldiers and uncouth crackers. Jackson's aggressive style, his frequent resorting to duels and street fights, his angry acts of personal and political retaliation seemed to fit what one Frenchman with Jacksonian sympathies described as the Westerner's, quote, rude instinct of masculine liberty, end quote. By this code, independence came from clearing the land of potential threats. The threat could come from Native Americans, rival squatters, political adversaries, or, quote, ill skinned Easterners who used fancy words to get what they wanted. The Crackers' survivalist ethos invariably trumped legal niceties or polite decorum. It was these traits that shaded Jackson's public image in the Cracker mold. Jackson partisans were routinely chastised for their lack of taste and breeding. God, man, there's an obsession with breeding. Oh my God. Anyway, defending Jackson seemed to require threats that celebrated physical prowess over mental agility.
To be sure, even beyond class issues, Jackson's candidacy changed the nature of Democratic politics. One political commentator noted that Jackson's reign ushered in the game of brag, in quotes. Jacksonians routinely exaggerated their man's credentials, saying he was not just the Knight of New Orleans, the country's deliverer, but also the greatest general in all of human history. Lying and boasting made up the absence of class pedigree. He used duels, feuds, and oaths to rise to the political pecking order in the young state of Tennessee. While Jackson had little interest in squatters' rights, his party did shift the debate in their favor. Democrats supported preemption rights, little, which made it easier and cheaper for those lacking capital to purchase land. Preemption granted squatters the right to settle, to improve, and then to purchase the land they occupied at a minimum price. The debate over preemption cast the squatter in a more favorable light. For some, he was now a hardworking soul who built his cabin with his own hands and had helped to clear the land, which benefited all classes. The presidential campaign of 1840 appears to be the moment when the squatter morphed into the colloquial common man of Democratic lore. The squatter may have been tamed, at least in the minds of some. Political equality did not come to America in the so called Age of Jackson. Virginia retained property qualifications for voting until 1851, Louisiana and Connecticut until 1845, North Carolina until 1857. Tennessee did not drop its freehold restrictions until 1834, after Jackson had already been elected to a second term. 8 states passed laws that disenfranchised paupers, the urban poor. Meanwhile, many towns and cities adopted stricter suffrage guidelines for voting than their state legislatures did. This was true for Chicago and for towns in Crockett's, Tennessee, and Pro Jackson, Alabama.
Okay. Um, Off the top, I think the one obvious difference between Jackson and Trump for me is that Jackson had actual military prowess, whereas Trump is just a little bitch playing tough guy. Otherwise, Trump is he pretty much nails the Andrew Jackson routine beyond that. It's interesting to see that, we've seen this before, a wealthy guy playing the common man. That's definitely what we're experiencing right now. And something else that was brought to mind reading this was like, God, I wish Democrats would, take a page out of his playbook, but Trump really does have a lot of talent when it comes to like branding and reaching like, critical voters that don't necessarily, pay too much attention to politics. I've just so long wanted Democrats to fight back as far as that goes. I know it means getting down on his level and all that stuff. And, Democrats go high when others go low or whatever. But, sometimes you got to get down in the mud too,
I have a couple of thoughts there. Yeah. So what was it during President Obama's first term? The slogan came out, when they go low, we go high. They went so high, they rode right the fuck off the cliff.
Yes, amen. That is so true.
And yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the things that, really attracted to me to Big Sarge and Sons of Liberty was when it was needed. Big Sarge really had that anger that I felt like was missing.
Oh, absolutely.
In the Democratic Party, and he spoke to it, and he was out there speaking my rage that I felt inside.
Like, as much as I hate Gavin Newsom,
I was sitting here thinking that, get out of my head.
As much as I hate that guy, like, I gotta say that his like clapback Twitter game right now is just so on point. I'm loving it. I'm loving it so much. I just wish that it were somebody other than Gavin Newsom and, somebody that I could like respect. But, for now, I'll just have to settle for good old Gavin.
Yeah. I do want to go back up here just for a second where she was talking about the people who supported Jackson were these basically, the way it reads, and maybe I'm wrong in my interpretation, but it was the less intelligent, less educated people who were ready to fight over any aspect of Jackson, whether, if you were negative about him. And that is so much the absolute heart of Trump's MAGA crowd. All of the Trump MAGA support, or, the MAGA supporters, the true MAGATs is, I guess, what they're called. I hate saying maggots because that's a Slipknot fan, not a freaking fan of Trump. Anyway, there's a lot of similarity between today's MAGA and, whatever the Jackson people were of that time.
Yeah, I remember thinking that as I was reading her descriptions of like his fan base or voter base, I guess you could say. I thought to myself, oh my God, it's like the MAGA folk, like nothing changed. Like and actually that's the point of the book, right? That's the point that she's trying to make, is that these people have always been here, and yeah.
And that's the crazy part is the manipulation, because they know, like Jackson knew, he had to know how to manipulate these people. They were a larger growing part of the political psyche, I guess, the people who had the ability to vote and put people in office. And, he tapped into it and he said, you know what, I'm going to be like them. I'm going to act like them, pretend to be them. And I'm going to, get them to follow me down whatever freaking monstrosity of a presidency I want to create. And that's exactly what Trump's done. You were spot on when you talked about Trump's branding, ability to brand, and I've long said, or I guess I haven't said it out loud, but, I've thought it, Trump's not good at anything except sales. And in that, what I mean is that, I spent a short time in full on sales. In my days in corporate pond, there was some salesmanship to what we did, but it wasn't full on commission based sales. And
Mhm.
in that type of sales, if you think about anytime you've had to interact with a salesperson, there are people who can sell to anybody. There are good salespeople, there are bad salespeople, and even in the good and bad, there are those, like I said, that can sell to anyone. Trump is that bad good salesperson, and what I mean by that is he is that person that can sell to anyone, but 99% of the people, and it's weird because I say that knowing that a third of our country voted for him all three times, but 90% of the people that buy from a bad good salesperson will not go back to them because, like, if okay, let's say you're buying a car,
Mhm.
you're never, once you buy the car, you're never going to be able to get a hold of them about issues you've got. They're always going to they're always going to blow you off. It's not somebody you're going to reach out to. A really good salesperson is going to build that clientele of repeat business that's going to come back year after year. They're going to eventually send their kids to you, their friends and family to you. But that bad good salesperson, the person that can sell to anyone, you're not going to send anyone to them. You're never going to go back to them. Yes, they sold you whatever it was you bought, but they did so in a way that made you feel as sleazy as they are.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that, I've come to accept about MAGA is that while a lot of people consider them a cult, and yes, there are some cultish like aspects to the movement, I think more than anything, it really is just the fact, like, Trump was the big giant orange baseball bat that the vast majority of Americans wanted to take to the federal government. They didn't care if it had a D or an R behind their name. They just needed that baseball bat, and Trump was that person, you know what I mean? And I
Oh,
can
absolutely.
actually relate to that. Like, because I was kind of at that, like, I am at that place, I should say. I mean, I'm done with establishment politics. I'm just so done with the Democratic Party. I'm just done with the establishment, both sides, all of it. So it's for that I can relate to a lot of like MAGA folks' angers, and it's why I'm not as angry as I was at them, because I've gone from a place of like, you know, God, how can these people be so racist and bigoted and da 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 da, to, is it really that, or is it just a collective anger that, yes, I'm sure there's all of those things. There's the cult, there's the racism, there's the bigotry, there's all of those things. But underneath all of that is the rage and the anger that's fueling it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I know what you mean, and I will not let them off the hook for the racism, the bigotry, and the hatred that they have, with the caveat of knowing that that's been a taught thing. It's not something that anyone's ever born with. Now, I say that, and I will also say that at some point we are all responsible for who we are, for the
Mm-hmm.
thoughts we have.
Mm-hmm.
But I think back to 2015 and one of the debates. He was on stage and he talked about how people from the Democratic side and people from the Republican side both came to him asking him for money, and he would write them checks. And for a lot of people, that was like this inside moment that was just like, oh my God, here's this outside guy who's not a politician giving us this insight. And just like you're talking about, there's this rage that was the start of the unleashing of the rage towards the American political system. I was aware of that probably, man, I think I joined. So the corporate pawn company that I worked for had a PAC. And as a manager, I became a member of that pack. I would never do it again. Ever would I give money to a corporation to give influence or have influence over politicians. I
Mm-hmm.
understand the dangers of that now. But one of the things we got out of donating a small percentage of our check every week, or every pay period rather, was that once a year they took all of the managers who donated out to this really nice dinner somewhere in the region. And at one of these dinners, we had the lady that was over that aspect of the corporate pawn company who handled the pack and, out there getting money or giving money to get laws passed that they wanted passed, or, vice versa, blocking laws that they didn't want passed. She talked about that very same thing. She's like, yeah, you'd be surprised. Most people think that we only get money from one side, but we take checks from both D's and R's alike.
Yeah.
Or rather, they sign checks to D's and R's alike in supporting those politicians to try to make sure that they had laws that favored their business, whether it helped or hurt the normal everyday working people was beside the point. It was, how did it help the bottom line?
Yeah. And that just really speaks to like that uniparty element to our government. Like, I'm not saying that they're unipart or the same on everything, but certainly when it comes to like economic issues, oh my God, they're lockstep with one another. And it's silly that people think otherwise, to me anyway. It's why you can't get anything that would be just even slightly helpful to your everyday Americans, like to our wallets. It's why we can't get anything done. It's
Yeah,
because they're both the it's capitalism, to be quite honest. Like, they're
that's
both
exactly it.
just capitalist, and at the end of the day, that reigns supreme.
Yep. And it's funny. I saw a video on TikTok this last week. I want to say it was, man, it was early in the week. I want to say it was like Monday or Tuesday. And it was a young man who said that in his conversations with his more centered liberal friends, that he come to understand the difference between him being leftist, and left leaning, and his leftist friends and his liberal friends. And the difference in understanding was when they asked their liberal friends, who do you fault for the rise of Donald Trump and Donald Trump being what he is, where he is now? His liberal friends would say, yeah, I blame MAGA. I blame his supporters. And the difference for them and the leftists were that the leftists were, oh, I blame capitalism. I blame corporations for Donald Trump being where he is. And that is what cemented for me. I mean, again, I have always thought that I lean more left than liberal, but there are some ways I can see where someone would say, oh, you're liberal, not left.
Hmm.
And it's a big umbrella, whatever. I hate trying to quantify myself in any
Hmm.
exact place. But when he said that, I was like, well, then I'm fucking left, man, because I know for a fact it is this just crony capitalistic society that we live in that is, it's money over people, it's profits over people that have gotten us to where we are right now in our political system. And just like you were saying, they are the same, they're the birds of the same feather, or vice versa, or whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
They are literally and up until Donald Trump ran, you wouldn't have told me they were different. You couldn't have. For a long time, I said
Hmm.
there's maybe small differences, but overall they're the same. And yeah, since Donald Trump came into the world view in 2015, they have separated more. If he went away and all this hadn't happened, they would be, it would be what, 1 and 1A.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny when you were telling me about like your friend and the difference between a liberal and a leftist. I swear I thought you were going to say the leftist would say it's the Democrats' fault, because that's what I would say. That's what I would say. It's like, yes, of course, it's the corporations and the, crony capitalism, all that stuff, of course. But it's the Democrats that who have allowed it to go on for as long as it has, and has allowed income inequality to get as bad as it is. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
that's where I would say it's the Democrats that makes me, and therefore makes me more of a leftist, and certainly not a liberal.
Yeah,
But
we could probably spend a couple of episodes strictly talking about that.
oh, for sure, for
All the
sure.
times that the Republicans are
Um,
like, yeah, we're not going to play by the rules. And the Democrats are like, okay, but we're still going to play by them.
dude, that gets my blood boiling so fast. Like, you just don't even know. Oh my God. I cannot stand the Democrats. I hate them. Anyway, um, okay, so let's jump into our Lifestyles of the Looting Class segment.
Every time I read that, Lifestyles of the Looting Class, I always hear in my head, Good Charlotte's Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I always
Really?
start singing that song. Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh my God, like you say that, and I can remember the name of the band and I remember the name of the song, but I'm having trouble recalling to my mind the sound, like the music part of it.
Well, I'm not going
So
to sing
I'm
it for
definitely
you.
gonna have. Well, I'm gonna go look that up because I feel like I remember loving that song.
Yeah, you'll
It's
love
just
it
been a
again.
minute since I
Yep.
heard it.
All right, so this episode's Lifestyles of the Looting Class, why we can't have nice things. Today's oligarch and Scooby-Doo villain, Elon Musk. So every year, Forbes puts out its world's billionaire list. And I kid you not, when I was looking this up, the first time I did it, I found, Forbes list. And then this time when I was doing it, I found the same list. But for some reason, I was going back and forth and I found they literally have it on a like live list where as kind of like the stock market ticker where it changes, any change in it, they're tracking that. But anyway, I digress.
Oh my! Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. So for 2025, released April 1st of 2025, and yes, I wish it was an April Fool's joke. And Musk was the wealthiest man in the world, worth 342 billion. He's listed as a resident of the US and his industry is listed as automotive. He's listed as having co-founded 7 companies, including electric car maker Tesla, rocket space producer rocket producer SpaceX, and artificial intelligence XAI. Let's talk about how Mr. Musk pulled himself up by his bootstraps to become the absolute biggest Scooby-Doo villain. According to an April 5th, 2024 article in Business Insider, Elon Musk's parents are Errol Musk, an engineer, and May Musk, a model and dietitian. Elon and Errol Musk appear to have a strained relationship based on comments in the press. Errol Musk has made the news for fathering children with his former stepdaughter, Jane, and I'm not going to attempt to read her last name.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, clearly
Bazoodenhout. We'll just call it Bazoodenhout.
I like it. Clearly, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Many
Because that
men,
was fun
women.
to say.
Yeah. Errol Musk spoke about the Musk family wealth. We are very wealthy, Errol said. We had so much money at times we couldn't even close our safe. Some of the wealth came from the half share in a Zambian emerald mine that Errol owned. Now, in the article, Musk denies that his parents had an emerald mine, and they share and the article shares a tweet. He didn't own an emerald mine, and I worked my way through college, ending up $100,000 in student debt. Musk tweeted in 2019 in a response to a user on X. It's a short article and kind of funny in a
Likely
sinister,
story.
right? Yeah, very likely story. It's a short article and kind of funny in a sinister way. Business Insider quotes an interview with Rolling Stone. The Tesla CEO told Rolling Stone in 2017 his father is a terrible human being. You have no idea how bad, Musk said. Almost every crime you could possibly think of, he has done. And again, I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But you know the old saying, like father, like son. So I really wanted to focus on Elon Musk's XAI, also known as Grok or Mecha Hitler, and the impact of the working class people. And since we are a working class podcast focused in on being Southerners on the left, this really hits home for me. Musk and XAI say that they will bring about 300 jobs with XAI. Rules, regulations, and oversight. What oversight? The APA, whose administrator is Lee Zeldin, who in the past has been very critical of the EPA's approach to environmental protections, has repealed all greenhouse gas. standards that were put into place in 2009 during President Barack Obama's administration. XAI is a power-hungry thirst trap. XAI needs 300 megawatts of energy to power the facility, the equivalent to 200,000 homes. What will the impact to the rest of Memphis and Tennessee's power grid be? MLGW already has issues with power outages, and I know this from personal experience at work and some of the people I talk to who live in Memphis. They have power outages like I've never seen. How much will the increased power usage impact the price of energy? MLGNW is already known as Memphis Light Gas and Robbers. It requires 5 million gallons of water per day to supercool to cool the supercomputer. And I bring that up because Memphis is known to have one of the cleanest aquifers in the country. And I kid you not, you can go into Memphis and, my wife and I have lived out in the country for a while now, and we love our well water. It's really clean. But Memphis is damn clean water. It's pretty tasty. I brought home some one day, and I gave it to my son because I thought I tasted something odd in my water. And I gave it to him, and he's like, Ooh, what is that, Fiji? And I was like, no. He goes, oh, it's Memphis Tap. I was like, yep. And, Fiji is known to have some pretty clean water. Shelby County received an F from the American Lung Association's most recent State of the Air's ozone report. The city ranks second in the nation in terms of asthma-related ED is what it says, but I believe that's supposed to be ER visits in the nation, and seventh in asthma-related deaths. But all of those computers need a vast amount of energy to run. Fueling them has been 35 unpermitted, again, I ask what oversight, temporary, so they say, gas turbines, which have been pumping out a level of emissions that, according to environmentalists, is exacerbating the health issues of an area already crushed by decades of pollution. XAI forged ahead quietly and quickly, signing non-disclosure agreements with key players, including Memphis Gas, Light, and Water, also known as MLGNW. Proponents claim the facility will bring high-paying jobs and economic growth to the area. Data centers like XAI's are highly automated and require relatively few on-site employees. Most high-paying roles, such as AI engineers, data scientists, software developers, are often filled by remote workers or specialties brought in from outside the community. The majority of local jobs tend to be facility maintenance, security, and support services, which typically pay less than the highly skilled technical positions. While the facility may boost local tax revenue and some service contracts, much of the economic benefit, including profits and many high-wage jobs, flows out of Memphis to XAI's executives, shareholders, and remote employees.
Wow. Yeah. While you were reading that, it had me thinking about the one I heard about in Louisiana that Zuckerberg is going to build. And I was just looking, and I just found an article on CNBC. It says Meta is building the largest data center in the Western Hemisphere on a sprawling site in rural northeastern Louisiana. And I looked it up, and apparently it's only 4.5 hours from the one you just read about. So,
good Lord,
they're going to be everywhere.
One of the articles I've got attached here says that very same thing, that it's going to push other companies and more people to do the same. So, i.e., good old Zuckerberg now doing one in Louisiana. Yeah. So yeah, they will be everywhere.
It wasn't even that particular data center or even this one in Louisiana that I first heard about these things. More Perfect Union did an excellent report on a data center in Georgia where this family is living 400 yards away from this data center that just all of a sudden popped up right at the end of their road. And it has caused their drinking water is brown. It's caused all sorts of problems with the energy grid and all of that. It's crazy. And those same problems are coming from Memphis, and now they're coming from Northeast Louisiana. It's oh my God, it's so overwhelming because it's what do we do? Like, how
Yeah.
can we make people care about this, you know?
And that goes back to earlier when you were talking about the super bunkers that all these um, tech oligarchs are building because of the problems that they're creating. And I think about, Elon Musk talking about getting to Mars to save humanity because the Earth is, on this path we're on, where we're literally watching it burn. And he's a big part of the reason it's burning. And instead of doing something to help stop it and improve the things here on Earth, pouring gasoline on the fire, and then, hey, let's just go to Mars.
Yeah. Oh, these people. I just can't. I just can't. Oh my God. Anyway. Well, that's depressing. And I guess on that note, we'll wrap it up. Just kidding. Do you have something happy to leave us with, John?
Oh, I wish I did. Nothing comes to mind right now.
No. But seriously, I guess that's all that we have for this particular episode. I hope that everybody's learning something, and that most importantly, you're realizing just how much the Epstein class hates us all. And not only do they hate us, but apparently they fear us. So I guess that's sort of the upside, that happy note we're looking for, because they wouldn't be building doomsday bunkers if they weren't afraid of us. So let's remember that, people. They fear us. Join us in 2 weeks as we continue to explore class in America and call out the oligarchs destroying our country. Currently, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube, and Substack by searching at Waste People Pod.
Just a reminder that all the sources we use to compile the information discussed in this episode will be linked in the show notes, so please check them out.
Okay, well, until next time, everyone. See y'all then.